I find it hard to believe that all of these were just like golden calves, right? I just don't believe. I think it's quite possible that there were some literal beings from ancient times that were being worshipped as gods or rulers or leaders. So, very interesting. And here's our next listener question. I think this one is specifically for King.
Okay, from Hector Sanchez, what is the strongest proof that the alien mummies are legit?
I said when you look at it all together, in order to make these mummies, you would have to find bones that are, a certain density. They're not the same density as human. They're less dense. You would have to find certain bones that we don't see in nature, like the small ones. Their rib cages, they're like fully circled around. They're not like ours.
All Things Unexplained is free to watch on YouTube and listen to wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to support our show, you can visit our YouTube store. Additionally, you can find us on Venmo under All Things Unexplained. Be sure to check out our website, allthingsunexplained.com. All proceeds from the sales of Dr. Mounce's books on Amazon and Audible also go straight to our show.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's.
Did the CIA write Wind of Change by the Scorpions?
As humans busied themselves about the various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied.
Dr. Loeb, what percentage chance do you give it that you have indeed uncovered extraterrestrial or non-human technology?
With infinite complacence, people went about their affairs, yet across an immense ethereal gulf, intellects vast and unsympathetic drew their plans against us.
All of a sudden, a stick out of nowhere landed right in front of us, and there was no tree, nothing overhead. Something threw it at us.
Yeah.
All Things Unexplained.
So some of that, I think, sir, we'll save for closed session.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
All out of bubblegum, folks. And that's from Rowdy Roddy Piper. And they live, of course, in a very dystopian setting in society, right? Where all of a sudden he puts on the shades one day and boom, he's surrounded by aliens. And King, I kind of feel like we're heading toward that road. I don't know when it's going to happen, but what do you think? I feel like something big is set up to happen.
Well, I mean, again, I like looking at patterns, and right now, all the things that are coming out is best to look back in history and looking back on people that were coming from the inside or saying they were coming from the inside. A lot of people have this, 2027, 2030 date that allegedly is supposed to be some type of countdown. And we look at it ever since Grush came out, there's a lot of moving parts. We can say Elizondo in 2017 started this whole thing. But since Grush came out, it's just a lot of moving parts. You're starting to see the whole UFO subject become very commercial. Super Bowl had like 4 commercials with ETs and UFOs in it. So I think, maybe it is slow drip and controlled disclosure. They're just letting out one piece at a time.
I'm curious, both for you, King, and for those that are tuning in with us on YouTube or Twitter, wherever you are following us, what got you into this topic? So those that are listening, type in the comments what got you into this topic, and King, what got you into this topic? Because you know a lot about it.
I started with Bill Cooper, and he had this whole thing about secret societies, and that was my thing. I liked the idea of secret societies, so I want to study it and learn about them. And also, Bill Cooper spoke about aliens. I listened to it, but I never really gave it much thought. I was like, oh, aliens, cool, whatever. He already talks about weird things with secret society, so I never really put too much thought into it. And after 2017, I just started like, like the government saying these things now? And I started, looking back, and I had already heard about Bob Lazar, and you just start re-looking at all of these old things I had seen, and now it starts making more sense. So then I start looking a little further back, and we can go back to 1561 with the situation. I forgot over where it's at. It's a famous event, but people were seeing things in the sky back in 1561.
Wow.
Yes.
No airplanes then. So it's been so yeah, but Bill Cooper for me was how I got into all of this stuff.
Blake, how about you? How did you get into this world?
Well, honestly, sort of by accident. The nature of what I do, working in writing and in the film industry, I was exposed a lot later in my life into science fiction, horror, that kind of thing. But I think growing up, what got it for me was there were like these mysteries of the unexplained, like these Forrest Ackerman, Arthur C. Clarke kind of books and things that kind of got me into that. And I remember reading about something called the Tunguska event, which happened, I believe, in 1908, where all of a sudden there was this fireball that kind of appeared over the sky that crashed in Siberia and left this deep impression in the earth. And they really didn't honestly know what it was. And then, of course, Flight 19, the disappearance of Flight 19 and the purported connection between that and UFOs. And, of course, Close Encounters of the Third Kind movie-wise. And I think what got me into the modern-day idea of aliens and, UFOs, unexplained phenomena, and the government's involvement was when Chris Carter premiered The X-Files in 1993. That, the truth is out there. That line stuck with me so much so that I really kind of felt like I wanted to take up the mantle of, and crusade about that and kind of be a spokesperson on things that are unexplained. Obviously, I focus a lot more on like water cryptids and things like that, but the alien thing has always been there. I had an encounter with an unexplained aerial phenomenon back in 1996 as a child, and it kind of stuck with me ever since then. And by that point, the X-Files had kind of already been there and started touching on the shadow government and the hiding of things and what we know there, and then the Mayan calendar and how those events are happened there. And then it all kind of started with the X-Files and Fox Mulder and Scully and that cigarette smoking man. That sort of all kind of that kind of all kind of clinched it for me. So I think it would be foolish of us to think that we are the smartest thing out here. That would be very foolish and very selfish and egotistical. The universe is huge, and I mean, obviously, there's been all these reports, and things have been declassified. Project Blue Book and so many of these other things, and I mean, they're here, and I mean, the government shouldn't think that we're surprised. We knew they were here years ago when we were being told that there were weather balloons or strange weather phenomena or testing of military items that were not widely known to the public. That's what I always said. I mean, it's not like we didn't know they were here. It's like you're admitting they're here, but we already knew they were. So, and I think it's just a fascination thing. Joe actually mentioned in one of his comments, he's talking about the civilizations and the hybrids. And I think that goes back to what King was talking about and what Tim was talking about the different sizes of these remains, hybridization, and of course Atlantis. And I really think that it goes back further than we'll ever understand. I mean, I've studied biblical references in Ezekiel. To me, it sounds like what is described in some of those passages are UFOs. The chariot of fire with the revolving lights and the multi-headed creatures and things like that. I really think that what we're getting a taste of there is extraterrestrial life.
Yeah, we've heard that reference many times on this show. And well, I'm going to throw it to Smitty here. So, Smitty, in terms of, let's go back to the alien mummies specifically. What was your initial thought when you heard about these alien mummies? What's your thought currently?
I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence about it, but I think it is interesting that it has been so perpetuated in the press and that this man thought that he had such a legitimate artifact on his hands that he brings this before the highest level of the government in Mexico. I mean, it's pretty impressive if you think about it. I don't think if he thinks that everyone's going to think he's a charlatan, he would bring this before the Congress. I mean, that would be something that you might see at a carnival when we were kids in the 1980s. You know, you go in these places and pay your dollar and see the Fish Woman, or P.T. Barnum actually had a half monkey, half mermaid. It's like the Fiji mermaid, where he sewed a monkey to a fishtail. But to bring it before a government leaders, it seems to lend some credence to it. I just need to do some more investigating in it. I'm not as well versed, obviously, as King on it, and probably not as well as Mounts either. But I think it's super interesting because, as a history teacher, of course, I've gone over Egyptian mummification, and I want to know what the implications, what King believes the implications of the mummification process for these beings are.
That's a great question.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's not really mummification. It's more like a desecration. Like, they're dried out. They still have their insides. They still, the new mummy that was brought out, Montserrat, was pregnant with actual pregnant with a baby in gestation, and it was to the point that they were able to see the hand and realize it was a tridactyl hand in the stomach. And you can go to the Alien Project. I'm not happy with the name, but it's a catchy, like the back to the carnival barking thing.
Right.
But you go there, and this is a study by Tahir Jamin. He's the French archaeologist who originally came across these things. He's doing his own separate investigation at the same time as Musan is doing his. So for all the people who are worried about Musan, you don't have to follow his investigation. Tahir Jamim is doing his own, and he's putting everything on the Alien Project. And instead of space, you do a dash, the-alien-project.com. And you can find everything in there, from the DNA to the carbon-14 dating to the CT scan, x-rays, breakdown about the Achilles tendon I gave you guys, about the heel bones and how they're different in size. They do away with the llama skull thing. They finally get rid of that. Yeah, man, the weird thing is that it doesn't seem that they were mummified. It looks more like they were just covered with this diatomaceous earth and left there.
Yeah. And to speak on what you're talking about, being a history teacher and the historian of the show, all ancient Egyptian mummies had their organs removed. You know, they were placed in canopic jars. Even the brain, was placed, or actually the brain was actually removed from the body and thrown away if it could be. But the other ones, canopic jars, were placed there, and the body cavity was filled with other things. And so that's pretty interesting that these still have the organs.
They have all their organs inside and everything. It was like I said, I said, okay, they're calling them mummies, but they're not mummies. These are really just dried out, desecrated bodies, I believe is called the term. But yeah.
It reminds me of the woolly mammoths, right? When we find whole woolly mammoths.
With grass still in the mouth, and we were trying to figure out how could something freeze that fast.
Yes. Woolly mammoths fascinate me. Did you hear that they were trying to reintroduce woolly mammoths into society? It's unreal. That's a whole other topic. Okay. So let's talk about if these alien mummies are real. What is the thought process on what happened? Do we think, and of course, this is pretty much just speculation at this point, right? And there could be 1,000 different answers to this question. But are they thinking that there was a race of aliens living here on Earth, or that there was some sort of crash landing? Were they all close together? Were they spread out?
Well, it kind of lends itself to the idea. Bob Lazar, he mentioned that they might have found these in an archaeological dig. So what's stopping from saying the United States already has these type of bodies And in that same place they found it, they found this craft. Like if you know, it could tie into a lot of different things and a lot of different ways. So yeah.
So you mentioned that like new bodies are being introduced to the public. Are
Yes.
they all coming from Peru, or are they all coming from a very close geographical site?
Yes. The gentleman Mario who found them, there's different sites. He's given up 2 or 3 sites. The last site he's given up, 2 of them were empty. One of them he left a mummy and a couple things in there for Jamin to find. He told them where it was at to find, and he told him that he left stuff there so he can find it. He went in there, and he found what they're calling Inkuri. It looks like a small little thing, but it has these proto wings sticking out the back, almost like it had wings.
Wow.
So yeah, so it's just like, you know, for me, the putting these things together idea, it doesn't fit because the sheer quantity. He says he has about 100, and he said 7 different species. We've only seen 3. The little short ones that we see as cake. Then we have Maria, who they call the hybrid, and then this next one that they're calling the insectoid because it has like these little insect wings.
Okay, over 100. And Helen of Crystals is agreeing there's around 100 of them. That sounds like a lot. If they came from a spacecraft, that's a fairly large spacecraft.
Well, we know that they laid eggs, some of them, and we know that the hybrids were given birth to human young. So, like these things were being worshipped. That's how our ancestors see them. We see it in the art from Peru. Like these were their gods.
So some of them laid eggs, and some of them were giving birth to live species.
Yes, that's what we found with Montserrat, which it was like even the way the mummy was found, it seemed like it was like holding its belly when it passed away. Quote unquote hybrids were apparently given natural birth, and the cake mummies and the insect mummies were laying eggs.
Interesting. You would think that if some civilization from another planet was going to make it this far, that they would have to sort of have a hybrid version of themselves to make it, right? Like humans are going to have to probably be a hybrid with artificial intelligence if we're ever going to make it to another planet. So
To speak about the hybrid, I don't know if you know this, but during World War II, the Russians tried to take a human and chimpanzee and come up with a super soldier that was half ape and half human being. Whether they were successful,
yeah,
I
how'd
don't
that go
really
for
know.
them?
I don't know.
What year was this?
And then we started
This
seeing
was in the
Bigfoot.
40s, so 1940s.
When did Sasquatch start popping up?
Yeah, exactly. That was my thought too.
Don't get us started.
You
on
know, and
Bigfoot,
that's
okay?
this is a good time to transition to our cryptozoologist expert, Blake. And I know Tim has some questions for him, so I'm going to toss it your way.
Well, and we're so pleased to have Blake Best with us tonight. First of all, Blake, can you tell everybody where's the best website to get more information about you and check out all your stuff?
Well, I appreciate that. I'm kind of all over the place. So I've got obviously my public figure page on Facebook, my personal page there. You just search Blake Best. I'm a 6'4" Korean guy with a nose ring. I'm really hard to miss. So you can find me there. And then of course I've got a website. It's blakebestauthor.wixsite.com/BlakeBestHorror. And that's got my books, the scores I've done for TV and film. It's got some projects I've produced. It's got just kind of everything I've ever done is kind of all right there. And then I'm constantly making announcements all over social media, the social media that I use anyway, which is mostly Facebook and Instagram.
Blake, you're the author of one of my favorite books, Fathom, and it's dealing with the Loch Ness Monster out in Scotland.
What a great cover. That's a great cover.
It really is. And I've got a lot of stuff here from Blake Best, and we've got a couple of other books here that people could check out from Blake, Save Me Now and Night Terrors. And Blake mentioned before the show, this is the 40th anniversary of Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yes, it is. That's really kind of you to share that. So, Save Me Now, actually, that's the album I just put out. So, I just put that out 2 weeks ago. And then it's kind of been blowing up. And it's got that music, actually, that you've been using on the show, Horizon.
Such good music.
I appreciate. Thank you. Yeah, so it's like Loch Ness. The Loch Ness Monster was kind of a topic near and dear to my heart. Again, same kind of vein, cryptozoology. But again, it's like a lot of people, I feel like, with the UFO believers and Bigfoot believers, it's like we come under fire a lot, you know, about what it is we believe. And who's to say, honestly? They're continuing to find things all the time. I always go back to this example. In 1938, a couple of fishermen were fishing off the Indian Ocean, and they netted a coelacanth, which is over 6 foot long, with spikes, and that fish was supposed to be extinct for 70 million years. And yet they found a whole nest of them, in that area where they were doing shrimping, and they found them alive and well. So if something like that can survive, what's to say something like a plesiosaur or a zeuglodon or a Bigfoot or an alien could not survive? And I just tell people, look to the skies, keep an open mind, and follow your heart when it comes to these things. You know better than anybody else what you've seen, and nobody can take those experiences from you. I mean, one of my favorite films, Fire in the Sky, a terrifying story, Travis Walton, but he stuck with his beliefs and he stood by what he said, despite what anybody else thought. And I think that takes a real hero to be able to stand behind your words like that, and believe in those things.
We had him on the show. He's 100% believable.
Yeah,
Everybody should go watch that show with him that we had. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? The thing with Travis, a shout out to Travis Walton, who was so kind to join us on the show one night. That event was traumatizing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. His friends were about to be charged with murder. It ruined all of their lives. They gained nothing from it. And I think that is the unfortunate side effect of a lot of these things in the UFO phenomenon.
Well,
Now,
Travis actually said he wished it would have never happened to him.
Oh,
because
yeah.
It's done nothing but mess with his whole life.
And y'all, one of the best things that Travis said that night, this was kind of a moment of humor out of nowhere. But CJ asked him if he had had any other UFO encounters, and he had. So on the way back from a conference one night, he was with his son, and they were driving down the highway. It might have been California.
It was California.
Yeah. And they had an encounter with one of these triangular-shaped craft in the sky that we hear a lot of reports of, right? And his son said, "Dad, let's pull over, check it out." Dad was like, "No, I think we're just going to keep going." we didn't have enough of that. We didn't have enough of that. So Blake Best is with us tonight. In addition to King Wakata, we're so thankful. King Wakata. And we're so thankful for both of them. I think I nailed it this time.
Wakata.
Wakata. And I know I got King mostly right, at least. And Blake Best is with us. And Blake is not just an author. He's also an actor, and not just a cryptozoologist, but he's also a musician. And folks, if you tuned in at the very beginning of the show, you heard this incredible song, Horizon, by Blake Best. I thought this is rocking, but he's not just rocking either, because this one is a little one called Another Way. Blake, can y'all hear this? Another Way?
Mm-hmm.
I certainly can.
I think this is a great tune. And here's one called Can't You?
This is cool. This is a little slower for you.
I like the head banging song.
As a composer, that's one of the things. I'm sent a script and they say we've got this kind of feel for scenes 37 through 40. It's going to be somber. The character's going to be thinking about something that happened in the past and equating that to now. And so they give me those descriptions, and based on the dialogue and the stage directions and what's in the screenplay, I sit down and go to work. That piece right there took me 10 minutes to write, what you're listening to right
What?
now.
That's it? You're so talented.
10 minutes. I was in the mood. It was an acoustic guitar, and then I grabbed the piano.
It's getting very loud, Tim.
Oh, sorry about that.
Right. It's rocking though. Even to be more laid back, it's a rocker. So.
Yes, it's really good.
And we have one more here from Blake called Worth Fighting.
Oh, worth fighting for. Yeah.
Worth Fighting For. How's that volume?
That's okay, I think.
I think this is a pretty catchy one too. Worth Fighting. And again, Blake, if people want to check out your music, where can they do that at?
It's on my website. The albums, the record label pushed it out 2 weeks ago, so it's on all streaming platforms. Support an artist, somebody that's out there touring and doing things. You know, it's on iTunes, it's on Apple Music, it's on Amazon, it's on Spotify.
And they just look for Blake Best.
They can just look for Blake Best. There's two new albums on there. That one that came out a couple of weeks ago, and then one that came out last year, towards the middle of last year. So. And there's singing and stuff on some, and then some are just instrumental. So far, what you all played tonight has been instrumental stuff, and some of my favorites. So.
That's great. And we're joined tonight by Blake Best and King Agata. And, you know, we I just say it real fast. You know, I learned a long time ago. If you're not quite sure what to say, just say it super fast. And, you know, we talk about everything from Bigfoot to UFOs and aliens and UAPs and everything in between. And if that kind of thing is for you, and you want to support the show, there's a few ways you can do that. Number one, you can use the super chat. You can use the super stickers. That's right next to the chat bar in YouTube. Later on, you can go back and do super thanks, and we really appreciate it. You can visit our YouTube store. That's a great way to support the show. We've got hats. We've got coffee mugs, hoodies, and slides. Anybody know what slides are?
I know what they are.
Okay. They're not called slides. They're called sandals.
They go on your feet, and they don't have a thing that goes between your toes. But that's on our YouTube store, and you can also support the show at BigfootUFO.com.
And BigfootUFO.com has links to our books, right?
Yes,
My
links
book
to all
and your
our
book.
books. You know, I'm an author, professor, narrator. Smitty's got some books out there too, and quite successful ones, by the way. And you can find all of them on there. And King, is there anywhere you'd like to direct people to visit and find out more about you?
Just hit my X Twitter. I hate calling it X. Sorry, Eli. At Ghetto Bitcoiner. And yeah, man, hosting spaces. I like to speak to all types of people. You guys give me way too much credit. I'm not a super smart person. I ask and I learn things, and I'm happy I'm able to come here and teach you guys a little bit of what I've learned from speaking to other people.
The fact that you are constantly trying to learn things makes you much smarter than most of the population. So
thank you.
That's right, lifelong learner. And Blake and King, would y'all be up for a few listener questions here?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to bring some of these up, and Smitty and or CJ are going to call them out. And
Smitty, you take number one.
I think this is a great question here from Sarah, UFO fan.
Sarah, UFO fan says, King, were the mummification of aliens perpetuated by humans who found their bodies at a crash site or by their own kind? Which is a great question, by the way.
I don't know that I understand the question.
In other words, did a human do this to their bodies, or did the aliens bury their bodies?
Right. That's a good question. I don't know. I feel like I think humans would have paraded them out a bit more. Like, these are our gods or something. You know, built memorials to them. This might have been by their very own people. Like, because the caves were closed down, so it was hard to very get to them remote. So they might have actually, that could have been like a burial place for those peoples, because apparently it's different sites with different numbers. So it might have been like different, I don't know, tribes, if these things had tribes, different burial grounds for their tribes.
Blake, you got any thoughts on this?
Sure. I mean, and it was a good question. Honestly, but I mean, while, you know, if we were going to assume that these were faked, which I don't assume that at all, the techniques can be done to age things and relic things like that. Like, obviously, I've had some guitars and things that were made to look 70, 80 years old when they were in fact mass produced, you know, just like 5 or 6 years ago. But it's a specific technique called relicking. But the way those bodies looked, that very much to my eye looked like that was not something created by a person. That was exposure to the elements and lack thereof, both. Because as King said, it looked like a desiccation, which is what a spider does. It drains a body of its, of the fluid of whatever it's catching, whether it's a fly or another insect, and leaves the husk there. And that's what this looks like. With the organs intact, the only thing missing is the fluid in the body, the blood or whatever life force it had. So honestly, I think that that's something that was naturally done to my eye, having seen a lot of strange things in this world. I have no doubt in my mind that those look authentic and like they were just made, that they were just found that way and, unearthed and then brought like that. Because why risk it? Why risk making something look tampered with if you want it to have validity in whatever community you're taking it to, whether it be cryptozoological or scientific community? If it looks tampered with, that's going to raise eyebrows right off the bat. But if it looks natural, there's going to be less question about the authenticity of the item and more questions about what it is as opposed to whether it's real or not.
Wow, that's well said, Blake. And I just have to say before I move on to the next question for CJ, it reminds me when we talk about these ancient and biblical peoples that worshipped other gods, right? And some of these were paraded around, and I find it hard to believe that all of these were just like golden calves, right? I just don't believe. I think it's quite possible that there were some literal beings from ancient times that were being worshipped as gods or rulers or leaders. So very interesting. And here's our next listener question. I think this one is specifically for King.
Okay, from Hector Sanchez, what is the strongest proof that the alien mummies are legit?
I said when you look at it all together, in order to make these mummies, you would have to find bones that are, a certain density. They're not the same density as human. They're less dense. You would have to find certain bones that we don't see in nature, like the small ones. Their rib cages, they're like fully circled around. They're not like ours.
To be continued.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's.
Did the CIA write Wind of Change by the Scorpions?
As humans busied themselves about the various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied.
Dr. Loeb, what percentage chance do you give it that you have indeed uncovered extraterrestrial or non-human technology?
With infinite complacence, people went about their affairs, yet across an immense ethereal gulf, intellects vast and unsympathetic drew their plans against us.
All of a sudden, a stick out of nowhere landed right in front of us, and there was no tree, nothing overhead. Something threw it at us.
Yeah.
All things unexplained.
So some of that, I think, sir, we'll save for closed session.
All Things Unexplained is free to watch on YouTube and listen to wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to support our show, you can visit our YouTube store. Additionally, you can find us on Venmo under All Things Unexplained. Be sure to check out our website, allthingsunexplained.com. All proceeds from the sales of Dr. Mounce's books on Amazon and Audible also go straight to our show.